Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. September has brought a lot of dry and warm weather, but things have changed markedly in the last day or two, with cooler and more unsettled conditions pushing right across the UK. Does that set the theme for the next couple of weeks? Well, I'm going to start by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic using this sequence generated with data from the GFS model. It runs from Tuesday, the 28th of September, 18 GMT. At the outset, outbreaks of rain are clearing eastwards. Some of those are quite heavy. And then a weak ridge of high pressure builds across the UK and potentially brings drier conditions through Wednesday. You can see it here. But if we look out to the Atlantic again, there are more weather fronts rapidly approaching. They bring wet and windy conditions across all parts of the UK through Thursday, potentially into Friday. And then things become interesting as we go through the weekend. On this sequence, the GFS develops a deep area of low pressure to the southwest of the UK, and the windiest conditions remain over France, not really bothering the UK too much, though there is the likelihood of heavy rain. But there's a good deal of uncertainty about how this low pressure is going to develop, what track it's going to take, and I'm going to show you some charts generated using data from other computer models shortly. Just to continue this sequence, it remains wet, unsettled into the early part of next week, but then by Wednesday, the 6th of October, there are some hints here of high pressure from the southwest, from the Azores, beginning to have more influence as it builds northeastwards over the UK. So potentially by the end of the week, if this GFS sequence is correct, we could be starting to see some drier periods returning, particularly to the south of the UK. I'll just show a few charts generated from the GFS model, a few static snapshots, starting with a jet stream. So here we are, Thursday, the 30th of September. See low pressures in the ascendancy, the jets heading towards the UK. Jump forwards to Friday, low pressure dominating. Essentially, the UK is on the cool northern side of the jet stream, which is just dipping here. And then by Sunday, the jet's really firing up quite a lot. It's digging a long way southwards here. Once again, low pressures therefore are dominating the UK's weather. All in all, unsettled and never particularly warm with the UK on the northern side of the jet stream. But as I say, there is quite a lot of uncertainty about how things will develop through the weekend. But just to take a quick look at the temperature forecast from the GFS, just to give some indications of what we can expect. This is showing forecast maximums Friday the 1st of October. So in the southeast, East Anglia, 16, 17 Celsius, cooler there as you head northwards, temperatures in single figures across Scotland. This is a minimum forecast temperature chart for 06 GMT Sunday the 3rd of October. Minimums in the south, still 8, 9, 10 Celsius, so not really cold at all. But on some nights, we're seeing colder conditions there in the north, 1, 2, 3 Celsius, so there is a risk of ground frost on some nights when we get the quieter spells, the clear periods developing, but it will really be varying a lot from day to day, just to do with the timing of those weather systems moving across the UK. But as I say, the risk of frost really looks mostly confined to the north of the UK. In terms of maximums on Sunday, this is when the GFS is showing very wet conditions across southern and central regions. They've certainly pegged back. It's going for maximums of 9, 10, 11, 12 Celsius in southern and central parts of Britain. It's actually a little bit warmer as you head northwards into Scotland, 12 Celsius there in the northeast. I'm not really convinced by these maximums. They are very dependent, though, on it being wet and overcast through the day to keep those values held down. As I say, though, it is something to keep an eye on. If we do get some very wet days, then temperatures will be held down significantly to fairly low levels at this time of the year. Now, I mentioned wind speeds. I think they are going to be a big factor, at least potentially, through the coming week. And I'll just show a few charts here to illustrate some possible scenarios. It really is important at the moment not to focus on the details at all, especially as we go into the first weekend, because there is a lot of difference between the computer models. But just to illustrate This is 09 GMT, Thursday, the 30th of September. At this point, there's still a pretty high level of confidence. We're seeing gust speeds, according to GFS, of 30 to 40, 45 miles an hour across much of England and Wales. Not so windy as you head into Scotland at this point. Looking at Friday evening, this is the Meteo France model. By then, we're seeing some very strong winds in the northwest there, 50, 60 mile an hour gusts off to the west of Scotland, generally windy across the northern half of the UK. As I say, I'm just using these to illustrate what could happen as we go through the coming days. It's really, though, through the weekend, as I say, that there is the potential. It's only a potential, it's just something to keep an eye on for it to turn very windy or even stormy in the southern half of the UK. The chart here is generated from the UKV model. This is the high resolution model which the UK Met Office runs, and it's showing forecast wind gust speeds at 0000 GMT, Sunday the 3rd of October. Look at this, we're seeing values of 60, 70 miles an hour in the southeast of England, perhaps East Anglia as well. It's all dependent on how that area of low pressure develops, but certainly this could be nasty if it develops in the way that the UKV model and the ICON model, which I'm now showing, are suggesting. Again, this chart is for the same time. Look at the wind speeds here, 70, 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour around exposed coasts in Wales and across the English Channel there. Very windy, even inland, 65 mile an hour gusts there in places, 40 to 50 towards the London area. I think, as I keep saying though, just keep an eye on the short range forecasts as the time approaches. If that low pressure develops differently, if it tracks further southwards across France, then it's going to be more a question of how much rain we get in southern and central regions, winds not being particularly important. But if it moves further northwards across and takes a track somewhere across the UK, there is the potential there for it to turn pretty nasty indeed. Looking at rainfall, I think there's going to be rain in all parts of the country, as you would expect, significant rain with that Atlantic flow dominating. The chart on the left is for days 0 to 5, the one on the right is for days 0 to 10, both using data from the GFS model once again. I think the key points here are really that the wettest conditions look like being in the west of the UK. What we can see is the yellows, green shading there on the left-hand side chart is restricted to western parts of Britain, perhaps Northern Ireland too. Then on the right, what we're seeing is over 100 millimetres of rain being forecast in parts of the west through the 10-day period. Central and eastern areas, it's between 10 and 20 millimetres, days 0 to 5. That's been increased to up to about 30 or maybe 40 millimetres in places when it's aggregated between days 0 and 10. So rain for all parts of the country, details up for grabs. There will be significant local variations, but I think the general pattern which has been shown here won't be too far off the mark, wettest in the west, northwest in particular. So at the end of the first week, how do all the deterministic models stack up against each other? Here's the GFS. It's finishing on Tuesday, the 5th of October here. There's a trough over the UK, high pressure building from the southwest. As we saw in the sequence, that started to have more influence just at the very end here. Looking at the Canadian model, again, high pressures maybe ridging in from the southwest, but perhaps looking transient. Nonetheless, the chance of something drier developing, at least for a time. The German ICON model, low pressure, deeper trough here over the UK, suggesting cool, showery and rather unsettled conditions continuing with high pressure being held at bay. The European ECM model, again, the high pressure building up from the southwest here, potentially moving across the UK in subsequent days, but at this point it's a showery or changeable scene. And finally, the UK Met Office. Again, the showery conditions across the UK, particularly in the north there, indications of high pressure cells having more influence perhaps going forwards from here. Taking all those deterministic models together, the message I think is High pressure possibly starting to have more influence once more towards the end of the first week of the forecast period into the second week. Nonetheless, a changeable picture even at that point, with still an ongoing chance of showers or longer spells of rain, more especially so in the northern half of the UK. So how is it looking through week 2? As usual, I'm going to take a look at the ensemble data to identify the trends and probabilities rather than specifics, and beginning here with the 16-day GFS plot for London with upper air temperatures across the top. So the thick black line there is the 30-year average, and as we go into the second week, most of the runs in the ensemble are slightly below it. But then moving forwards, there's an upwards trend, at least something of an upwards trend. More warm runs come into the mix. The mean, the ensemble mean, the thick purple line, which was below to begin with, gets pulled up to slightly above that 30-year average, at least for a while. It's also worth noting on this chart that the thick green run, the GFS operational, and the control run, which is the blue run, the thick blue line there, they both bring in significantly warm upper level air and keep it in place for much of the second week. Now, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule for what it means if the operational and control runs are both showing similar scenarios, as they appear to be doing so in this case. My own view is, and this is only anecdotal, if the operational and control run go for the same picture, the same evolution at the longer range, so we're talking about 7 days onwards, I tend to think it increases the amount of confidence in that being the outcome, even if a lot of the other members in the ensemble are going for something different. So here I would suggest that there is a reasonable chance of it turning somewhat or significantly warmer at the upper level through the second week, at least in this part of the UK, so London and the southeast. In terms of rainfall, I'll not say much about first week, but you can see there's lots of spikes there, indicating quite a wet scenario. But then through the second week, there are some spikes to begin with, but the number of them decreases. Doesn't look completely dry, but the picture here is a decreasing risk of rain through the second week. So taking it together, the potential for warmer temperatures at the upper level and fewer rain spikes indicating drier conditions. But so warmer and drier becoming more likely through week 2. Jumping up to Glasgow to see what's going on in the northwest. Upper air temperatures through week 2, close to average. The operational and control runs do bring warmer air up here for a time, but it looks transient. You see them both dipping away fairly quickly. Rainfall, well, there are certainly more spikes here on week 2 than there were on the London plot. But there is something of a tendency here for the number of them to reduce later on. So perhaps even in the northwest of the UK, high pressure could be having more influence at times through the second week. Taking a look at the maximum temperatures, this is the data table for London. I don't really think maximum temperatures are going to be a big factor during the next couple of weeks. But most of the columns here are going into the light yellow category, 11 to 15 Celsius. The amount of dark yellow increases and it becomes dominant for a time there. Those are 16 to 20 Celsius runs. All in all, it looks fairly close to average. Probably the temperatures through week 2 will be somewhat higher than they were through week 1. So that cool and wet weather, which we start with initially, looks like possibly being replaced with drier and somewhat warmer weather, at least during the days through week 2 in the south, the southeast, up to Glasgow. And here again, the columns are dominated by light yellows, 11 to 15 Celsius runs. There's some green there. It decreases a little bit, then increases once again. Those are runs going for maximums of 6 to 10 Celsius. A fairly average picture, I would describe this. Whereas in the south, there's a tendency perhaps therefore for it to warm up through the second week. Here it's more mixed with perhaps something of a warm up for a day or two, but then cooling again later on. All in all, very average really. Rainfall, so using the data table to break out the individual runs, just to show you what a fairly wet picture looks like. Week 1 here, lots of purple, blues, greens, pinks, oranges, yellows in the columns, small amounts of light grey. The light grey is showing runs going for completely dry conditions at the given time. But through week 2 there, the light grey increases, it becomes dominant. Again, it's pointing towards that drying trend in the south, the southeast. Some of the runs are still forecasting rain at the time slots. Not completely dry, as I said, but a good amount of dry weather would look likely if this is correct. Jumping up to the northwest, back to Glasgow, through week 2, the amount of light grey in the columns is much, much smaller. There's quite a lot of dark grey though. The dark grey is indicating runs just forecasting a small amount of rain at the time stamp, at the given time. But there's also quite a lot of purple, blue, green and yellow, still a little yellow there through week 2. More runs going for more significant amount of rain. It's a wetter pitch from the northwest. So again, it's showing that southeast to northwest split developing through week 2, driest and warmest in the southeast. Mean surface level pressure ensemble plot. This week I'm using Nottingham just to illustrate. With the ensemble data I'm focusing on week 2 of course, but I just wanted to point something out from week 1 towards the end. This is that potentially stormy period. What we can see is that there are quite a few runs in the ensemble bringing in deep areas of low pressure. You can see there's a rapid drop in pressure here with some of the individual runs, going from about 1,010 millibars down to 980 very, very quickly indeed. That suggests that it's a possibility of it turning very, very windy for a time. Through into the second week though, the trend upwards is fairly clear. The ensemble mean, the purple line, goes upwards. Most of the individual runs do too. So higher pressure returning through the second week. I'd say higher, not high pressure. And there are still quite a few runs in the second week which are bringing in areas of low pressure. But the trend is clearly towards higher pressure having more influence later on in the forecast period. Here's the GFS Ensemble mean at Friday the 8th of October, so aggregated pressure averaging all of the runs in the ensemble, and it's showing the likelihood of high pressure being centred to the south of the UK, low pressure somewhere near Iceland. Very, very typical pattern, southwesterly flow covering the UK. That would lead to the greatest risk of rain in the northwest, the driest and warmest conditions in the southeast. It's also very consistent with the European ensemble plot at the same time. Here we see again high pressure centred to the south, low pressure there somewhere near Iceland. Fairly dry at times in the southeast, quite mild or even possibly a little bit of late season warmth on some days if the sun shines. As you head northwest, temperatures generally a little bit lower and a greater chance of rain. So to summarise the next 14 days, week 1, it's unsettled in all regions with showers or longer spells of rain, often windy, and there is the potential for it to turn very windy or even stormy for a time. But details are uncertain, so keep up to date with the short range forecasts. Temperatures generally slightly below the seasonal average. Week 2, the signal is for high pressure to have more influence, particularly in the south and the east. So that's where the driest periods are likely. The risk of rain remains greater in the northwest. Temperatures often close to or slightly above the average, and there is the possibility of some rather warm days developing in southern and central parts of Britain. So there we have it. It's a very mixed bag. Unsettled through week 1, quite cool. Possibly drier through week 2, particularly in the south and the east. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it useful and enjoyed it. If you did, then please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks now. Bye.